My dad kicked me out on Christmas Eve. We celebrate real achievements here, not fake degrees. My cousin snorted. Enjoy your $30 K debt for nothing. I left quietly, logged in from a motel lobby, and accepted the NASA fellowship. They heard about it on the news. The sting more than the words, the sharp silence that followed the sentence my father spit at me still echoes louder than anything he actually said. It was Christmas Eve. The tree glittered with lights we'd hung when I was little, the same ornaments we'd reused for decades. And yet, the warmth I thought might greet me when I walked in the door was absent, smothered under layers of quiet resentment and generational pride. We celebrate real achievements here, my father said, not looking at me. Not fake degrees. My cousin Wyatt chuckled under his breath and added, enjoy your $30 K debt for nothing. I felt the burn rise in my chest, the heat of humiliation settling in my throat, but I said nothing. I just stood there in the hallway of the house I grew up in, holding a bag of homemade cookies I'd brought, like some sad offering of peace. The same house where I'd spent years trying to earn my father's approval, report cards pinned to the fridge, science fair ribbons, nights at the kitchen table solving physics problems he never asked me about. In that moment, every memory twisted into something grotesque. I didn't belong here anymore. Maybe I never did, so I walked away. Quietly. No big speech, no scene. I drove through the icy roads to a grimy little motel off Route 30, the kind where they buzz you in through glass, like you're buying smokes or sins. I sat in the lobby under flickering fluorescent lights and logged into my email. My hands were shaking, my breath fogging the laptop screen slightly from the cold. I clicked the message. It read, congratulations. You've been awarded the NASA Graduate Fellowship. I laughed, a short, cracked sound. They'd see it on the news in a few days. They'd know. And I wouldn't have to say a damn word. I hadn't planned to go home that Christmas. My original plan was to stay on campus in Ithaca and catch up on lab work, maybe have Chinese food with the two other grad students stuck over break. But 2 weeks before Christmas, Dad called. Are you coming home or not? That was it. No hello, no warmth, just an obligation hung on a string of indifference. I thought maybe, well, it's been a long semester, I had said, tentatively. Your aunt's making roast. Wyatt's flying in. Would be nice if you showed up. I should have said no, but I needed something. A flicker of normalcy, maybe, or closure, I don't know, so I agreed. I arrived on Christmas Eve around 5 p.m. Snow dusted the driveway, and the lights on the porch blinked red and green like a half-hearted apology. I stood for a moment on the welcome mat, suitcase in one hand, gift bag in the other. I was wearing the scarf my mother knit before she left, frayed at the ends but still warm. The door opened before I knocked. Aunt Valerie stood there with a glass of wine and a tight smile. Claudia. Well, there you are. Inside, the house looked exactly as I remembered. Stiff-backed furniture, family portraits on the walls, a Christmas tree overloaded with ornaments we never updated. The smell of roast beef and nutmeg hung in the air. Wyatt was sprawled on the leather couch, nursing a drink and laughing at something his girlfriend whispered in his ear. Dad stood near the fire, hands in his pockets, jaw tight. He barely acknowledged me. I tried to join the conversation, to offer small talk, updates from campus. But every sentence I started died under the weight of awkward silence or passive-aggressive remarks. When I mentioned my thesis project, how we were working on ion propulsion for deep space missions, Wyatt snorted. Sounds like make-believe. You're gonna build rockets out of student loans? I smiled, tried to let it slide. Well, NASA's actually. That's when Dad cut in. We celebrate real achievements here, Claudia, not fake degrees and fantasy jobs. My heart skipped a beat. It felt like someone had slapped me with a frozen hand. I looked around. No one blinked. Valerie sipped her wine. Wyatt laughed. I swallowed. Dad, this is real. I've been shortlisted for... Doesn't matter, he said, waving me off like I was noise. You're still just a broke student. You could have had a real career by now. I wanted to scream. Instead, I nodded, picked up my bag, walked upstairs, packed my things, and left. No one followed. The drive to the motel was a blur of red taillights and tears. I didn't want to admit I was crying. I passed the old high school, the frozen lake, the gas station where I'd buy gum after swim practice. All of it is familiar and suddenly so far away from who I'd become. The motel lobby smelled like old coffee and microwave popcorn. A young woman behind the counter barely looked up when I checked in. I sat near the vending machine, laptop open, heart pounding. I logged in, opened the email, NASA Graduate Fellowship, acceptance required by midnight. I stared at the screen. My finger hovered over the accept button, then I clicked it, and I felt something shift inside me, something released. 3 days later, the local paper ran a story. Lancaster native awarded prestigious NASA fellowship. I didn't know the university had submitted it. The headline popped up on Facebook. I didn't even share it. I didn't have to. I heard from Maddie, an old friend from undergrad, that Wyatt saw the article during brunch and made a joke about Photoshop. Dad reportedly left the room halfway through reading. I didn't reply to the LinkedIn request Wyatt sent a week later. Didn't answer the voicemail from Aunt Valerie a month after that. They had their chance. And they told me, loud and clear, what they valued. Not dreams, no effort, not me. I didn't sleep much that night in the motel. The room smelled like lemon-scented cleaner and mildew. The heater clanked every few minutes like it was kicking back at the cold just as hard as I was trying to. I lay there staring at the speckled ceiling, going over every second of the evening like a mental autopsy. I kept wondering if I could have said something differently, if I'd pushed back harder, if standing up to my father would have made a difference. But deep down, I knew better. That moment wasn't new, it was just the most honest he'd ever been about what he thought of me. I didn't belong in his version of success. I never did. By morning, I had over a dozen unread emails from Cornell, congratulatory messages from professors, research partners, classmates. A couple of them had seen the news story already. I responded to each one, thankful for the reminder that there were people who did see me. People who understood that chasing something bigger wasn't a joke. Still, I couldn't help but open my father's contact in my phone, thumb hovering over the call button. I even typed out a message, just a simple, "I got it, the fellowship, I wish you could be proud of me." I stared at it for a long time, then deleted it. I spent the next few days trying to focus. I met with my faculty advisor remotely from the motel, who was thrilled about the news. He offered to help coordinate logistics with NASA's program office. I told him I'd be heading back to campus early. He didn't ask why I wasn't with my family. He probably knew better than to pry. Still, I stayed in Lancaster longer than I should have. I didn't have to. I could have driven back up to Ithaca the morning after Christmas. But something inside me wanted to see what would happen. If maybe, just maybe, someone would reach out, offer some version of an apology, a small bridge back across the burning wreck. Instead, the silence stretched. The day after Christmas, I went out to get coffee at the Wawa across from Park City Mall. I stood in line behind an older woman buying scratch tickets and overheard a conversation between two men talking about the local paper's feature. "You see that girl they wrote about," one said. "NASA fellowship or something, grew up right here, smart kid." "Yeah, I saw, imagine that, must have had a hell of a family behind her." I didn't say anything. I just smiled quietly, paid for my coffee, and walked out into the icy wind. I ended up driving past the old neighborhood that afternoon. Not by plan, just habit. The street was still lined with the same sagging mailboxes and outdated plastic reindeer. But when I pulled onto our block, I saw something that made me freeze. There were two SUVs in the driveway, and through the front window, I could see everyone sitting down for leftovers. The whole family was still there, Wyatt, Aunt Valerie, even Wyatt's girlfriend, laughing, passing around foil-covered platters like nothing had happened. My chair at the table was gone. Literally gone. Pushed against the far wall, out of place like it had never belonged there to begin with. That moment, more than anything else, cemented it for me. They weren't waiting for me. They hadn't even noticed I'd left. I didn't get out of the car. Just sat there until my coffee went cold in the cup holder. The lights inside flickered softly, glowing across the snow. And then I drove away. I checked back into the motel for another night. Not because I needed a place to stay, but because I needed time. Time to let the wound cool, to figure out how to start rebuilding. That night, I began drafting my formal acceptance letter to the NASA program coordinator. I spent hours reviewing every word, making sure it was perfect. I included my updated research portfolio and added a short note of gratitude. "Thank you for believing in the work and in people like me. You have no idea what this means." The coordinator wrote back within the hour, "We're proud to have you. The sky isn't the limit, it's just the beginning." I cried when I read that. Really cried. not out of sadness but out of relief. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt seen. The next morning, I started looking for short-term rentals in Huntsville. The fellowship didn't begin for a few more weeks, but I was ready to leave. I needed to. Later that day, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. WAATT. Hey, saw the article, pretty wild stuff, congrats, I guess, you around? I stared at it for a long while. No, I'm sorry. No, I was wrong, just congrats, I guess. I didn't reply. A few hours later, another text came in. Aunt Valerie. Claudia, we didn't know you were so serious about all that NASA stuff. Your father's been quiet. Maybe you could come by before you leave town. The nerve. I turned off my phone. I didn't need to hear what excuse they'd come up with. I wasn't going to sit around while they rewrote the story in their heads, turning my success into a quirk of genetics or pretending they'd always believed in me. They hadn't. That was the truth, and I had to keep walking forward. That night, I sat in the motel room with a notepad and started writing down what I wanted the next few months to look like. I listed out goals, researched timelines, fitness habits, even restaurants I wanted to try in Huntsville. I filled 2 pages. At the bottom, I wrote, "No going back for validation. Ever." It felt like a promise. Just as I was finishing, I heard laughter outside my room. 2 families were checking in down the hall, dragging kids and coolers inside for what sounded like an overnight stop on their holiday road trip. One of the kids passed by my door, arguing about who got the top bunk. I smiled to myself quietly. There was something comforting in the sound of people going about their lives. I wasn't alone. I wasn't where I wanted to be yet, but I was on my way. A few days after New Year's, I left Lancaster for good. No long goodbyes, no tearful visits. I just packed my car, mostly textbooks, lab notebooks, and the 1 box of childhood things I had left, and headed south. The roads were still icy near Harrisburg, but I didn't mind. I had a long playlist and a heart that finally beat for me, not for approval. I arrived in Huntsville late at night. The city was quiet but felt alive in a way Lancaster never did. There were rockets here, real ones, the kind that pierced the sky and didn't ask for permission. I rented a small apartment walking distance from the Marshall Space Flight Center. It had a leaky faucet and noisy neighbors, but it was mine. My space. My start. Orientation week for the fellowship was like stepping into a parallel universe. Every person there was brilliant in their own way. We talked propulsion, deep space systems, orbital mechanics, and heat shields like it was casual gossip. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to apologize for my intelligence, didn't have to explain why I cared about the stars. They just got it. I made friends. Real ones. One of them, Raj, had grown up with a single mom in the Bronx and told me he knew what it was like to feel like your dream was some kind of punchline to everyone back home. We bonded over shared imposter syndrome and cafeteria coffee. We started carpooling and trading notes. He's still one of my best friends. My name started circulating in NASA circles for a paper I co-authored on fuel efficiency in low Earth orbit boosters. It was nothing groundbreaking, but it caught the attention of a few people higher up. I got invited to speak at a panel, then another. By summer, I was mentoring undergrad interns. Meanwhile, back in Pennsylvania, the house I grew up in started to unravel. I didn't learn about it from my family. They still hadn't contacted me directly, but word gets around. A Cornell alum emailed me asking if I was related to Randall Merrick. I didn't answer that email either, but I Googled him later that night out of curiosity. Turns out, the real estate firm had been bleeding money. Shady investments, bad flips, lawsuits piling up. Dad had refused to downsize, refused to modernize, and most of the employees had jumped ship. A newspaper article popped up. Lancaster developer faces civil litigation over alleged misrepresentation in property sales. He wasn't arrested, but his reputation was torched. There were whispers that he might have to sell the house. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for him. Another part of me, the part that remembered being told my degree was fake, that my future wasn't real, just felt quiet, not happy, not angry, just resolved. A few weeks later, I got a message from a different cousin, Leela, who I barely knew. "Hey, I just wanted to say congratulations. Everyone's talking about you around here. I think they get it now." I didn't reply. The real revenge wasn't in watching my father fall. It was knowing that I didn't need to be part of the narrative anymore. that I could exist entirely outside the framework they tried to confine me to. My success wasn't a rebuttal, it was an escape. But the final blow came unexpectedly, about a year later. NASA invited me to speak at a national symposium. The topic was advancing propulsion for deep space exploration. It was a big deal, televised on C-SPAN, streamed on NASA's site, and even picked up by a few major news outlets. My segment was clipped and shared across science forums. I spoke with clarity, confidence. My name, Claudia Merrick, flashed under the video with the NASA logo just above. A few days later, my old high school invited me to speak to their STEM students. I said yes. I walked into the same building where I once sat at lunch alone with a calculator, dreaming about escape velocity. I stood on that auditorium stage and looked out at a room full of wide-eyed girls and boys, and I told them the truth. That it's okay if no one claps for you. That it's okay to be misunderstood, to be laughed at, to be dismissed. Because the moment you start clapping for yourself, the world has no choice but to hear the echo. After the talk, a girl named Avery came up to me. She wore thick glasses and had braces. My mom says girls shouldn't do science, but I want to be like you. I smiled and gave her the only advice that ever mattered. You already are. About 6 months later, I received a letter. A real letter, not email. The handwriting was familiar, clean, and mechanical. Claudia saw your presentation. I was wrong. Dad, no apology, just 3 lines. The closest thing to vulnerability I'd ever seen from him. I didn't respond. Not because I was bitter, but because I was free.